Let's get started. Once again, restrooms across from the entrance. Water over here. Hello, Lake Worth. Hello, neighbors. I am John Faust. I am the president of Downtown Jewel Neighborhood Association and the current chair of the NAPC, the President's Council of Neighborhood Associations for Lake Worth. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We have, this is a noticed meeting. We have three commissioners here. Scott McVoy, to my left. I'm sorry. Christopher McVoy, Andy Amoroso, and Scott Maxwell. I'm going to bring Scotty up in 2 seconds and let him give you more of a background of why we're all here. Presentation's probably a lot shorter than questions and answers, and I do know that we have a debate to go home and watch tonight because some of us have our entertainment fix to get on. First we'll do business, neighborhood business, then entertainment. All right, please welcome to stage Scott Maxwell.
Thank you, John, and thank everybody for coming out this evening. Thank Alan Johnson in advance, Chief Assistant State Attorney, for coming out this evening to give a presentation. We're looking forward to that. I had the opportunity to listen to a presentation from Mr. Johnson. Closer to the mic. Ooh. Wow, this is really intimate. Had an opportunity to listen to a presentation from Mr. Johnson here about a month ago. On the issue of sober homes and what the county is trying to do to address the issue of sober homes, proliferation of sober homes, and of course trying to identify the bad players and weed them out, because at the end of the day there are folks among us who need help and they need professional help, and unfortunately I think in some cases there are folks taking advantage of this epidemic, this drug and alcohol epidemic, and they're exploiting these folks on top of their condition. But knowing what I know, what I think I know about the sober home issue and our inability at the state level to do much about them in terms of regulating them, I feel very comfortable that after listening to Mr. Johnson's presentation that there is hope. There's hope out there. And he's going to share a little bit of those thoughts with you this evening, and hopefully you folks will see some hope as well. I felt important to call this meeting because, as many of you know, I go to many of the neighborhood association meetings on a regular basis, and the issue of sober homes comes up almost in every meeting. And I know PBSO comes out and they give great reports, and of course they comment to the extent they can on sober homes. But it's really, really depressing for me as a public servant, as an elected official, to have to tell folks over and over and over again that in many cases our hands are tied, that we really can't help you. And it's so frustrating for me, because I think that people think the politician is just, blowing them off, and that's not the case. This is a mess that we're all in, and we all work together. Hopefully we'll get out of this mess together. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce again Mr. Alan Johnson from the State Attorney's Office. He'll give us a brief presentation. As John said, at the end of this presentation, he'll entertain questions. What we'd like to do, in the interest of time and the interest of getting folks out of here in time to watch the debate this evening, if we could try not to repeat the question. If somebody's already asked your question, if it's substance, please not get up and ask the question again. So thank you again for coming out this evening, and I hope we all learned something here tonight. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Well, the first rule is never be the only guy in the room of 200 people wearing a suit. So that's that. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your interest in the community. Many of you probably already know about the State Attorney's Task Force looking into, we call it the Sober Homes Task Force, but it's not just that. We have an epidemic that's going on in the nation, in the state of Florida, and particularly in South Florida. and in South Florida, particularly in Palm Beach County. I'm going to give you some horrific numbers just to start this off. Year to date, we have had in Palm Beach County over 1,800 opioid-related overdoses. Approaching 250, maybe more than that, deaths in Palm Beach County. This is just in Palm Beach County. What has developed around this opioid epidemic is an industry that is largely unregulated, and I'm talking about recovery residences, also known as sober homes. They're protected, and they have been for 30, 40 years by the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act, because you can't discriminate against somebody with a disability. It's kind of run amok, not kind of, it has run amok, because we have an economic model in the industry, in the recovery industry, that has incorporated the need for residence along with treatment. And when those residences are not regulated, not licensed, and not certified, you have a perfect storm that's inviting corruption, especially with the insane amount of money that is pouring into the recovery industry due to some federal laws that have put drug treatment and mental health treatment on a par with physical ailments like a heart attack or kidney problems. So this is just a perfect storm. Fortunately, Dave Ehrenberg was able to wrest out of Tallahassee money for a task force that has two different components. One component is law enforcement, and I will not be talking about that tonight. Judge us by what we do, not what we say, but I certainly don't want to tell you where we're going with that. The second is a task force that's devoted to change the regulations and the legislation in Tallahassee so that we can curb and control what's been a proliferation of recovery residences in neighborhoods. This is not a zoning issue. If you're here to talk about zoning, talk to your city attorney. This is about common sense legislation to control economic commerce. This is not to discriminate against people who have a disability. This is to actually help those people by making sure that they don't live in flop houses and drug dens and dens of prostitution, which is actually happening across the county. I didn't come with a PowerPoint. I didn't come to lecture or to speak about what we're trying to do, other than we are developing legislation right now, and it's open meetings. We have two different groups. We have what's called the PBSO group, which is a small group involving one municipal elected official, one person from the fire and rescue. We have several lawyers, two from municipalities, two from the that advise the industry, the recovery industry. We have two doctors that have been in this business and have seen how it's run amok with the economic model. And we also have, I think that's it actually. We have DCF and we have FAR, which is the certifying agency that certifies recovery residences. Right now it's just voluntary. We mean to make it mandatory for these economic model, these recovery residences that have people who are in active treatment. And also the Florida Certification Board representative. So that's a great group because it's small enough so we can get the job done. We're writing legislation on October 5th. We're going to spend all day, 9 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and we're going to be going through some legislation that we put together, and that we're going to be reviewing to make sure, number one, it's right, it's effective, and it's going to stick. And then we have another group that Dave decided he wanted to open it up. Andy, you're on that group. It's called the Sober Homes Task Force itself. There's about 30 to 35 members of that group. And Dave wanted the community to be involved. And so it's a much more broad-based elected officials, city attorneys, people in the recovery business, certified recovery residents, owners, and the like. And that group also is working on this legislation with us. They're open meetings, open to the public. If you just go to our website, the State Attorney's Office, 15th Circuit, go to our website, you can actually listen to these meetings if you have a lot of time, because they're right now 3 hours each. I think that there should be press medals for the press people who have been at these meetings. But anyway, we've had July, August, and September. We've had 3 meetings of each group. If you go to our website, there's a tab, which is how important this issue is. There's a tab on the upper right-hand side. It says Sober Homes Task Force. You can see all the legislation that we're working on. You can see some attachments that went to the meetings that were discussed. And you can actually listen to any of the meetings you care to. So with that, I'm going to open it up to, oh, by the way, these are hotline cards. If you see abuses, if you think that there's drug activity, especially if you see a recovery residence where you feel there are, 20 people living in a house, call the tip line, let us know. We have a database that we're working on. This isn't what law enforcement is doing. We're not just creating a database. We actually are working cases. Again, I won't discuss that. But the tip line is for anybody who thinks that you have intelligence that you can give us, and we'll, at the very least, we'll take the information and put it in our database so we know where the places are that may be the problem in your community. With that, this is kind of a little bit. What do you think about Lake Worth getting a new public address system for this place? What do you think? Maybe a portable one, right? I feel like I'm in outer space and like the space station. Beam me up some music or something. I don't know. But anyway, so if you have a question, is there another microphone or just talk loudly and I'll repeat it. And we'll go with hands right now. You, sir.
And that's making you.
Nice T-shirt, by the way. I had that album back in the day, and now it's.
It seems pertinent to tonight. So.
Yes, it is realistic. Yes, sir.
Is there going to be federal involvement in your task forces because you're coming up against the ADA and the FHA and?
Okay, good question. Question is, are there federal entities involved in our task force, the State Attorney's Task Force, the State of Florida Task Force, actually? We're supposed to be looking at the entire state. And you had mentioned because we're going up against the ADA and the FHA. Let me make this perfectly clear. I've read the Department of Justice and the HUD statement on the ADA and FHA. And I believe, and I'm 99% on this, that we have no problem in what we're doing with FHA or ADA, and I'll tell you why. And then I'll answer the first part of your question. What we are doing is trying to regulate for the benefit of those in recovery. Certain recovery residences, and I got to tell you, it's 60 to 80% of your problem are this class of recovery residents that is actually in economic commerce. In other words, there are people in active treatment and they're living in facilities that really should be part of the treatment, but they're not. The model does not, the insurance companies will not pay for the rent of people who are living in these places. And I will give you a statistic I read in an article recently. 75% of the people in Florida who are here for treatment for drug abuse are from out of state. And the reason for that is Florida has become somewhat of a, not just Palm Beach County, this is South Florida and Tampa and Jacksonville. It's because we've become a medical vacation destination. Now, that's not always a bad thing if everything is regulated and you have good housing where people are actually encouraged to become sober and to go on to a sober lifestyle. 15 years ago, you didn't have this problem, right? The problem that you have now, you had recovery residences in your neighborhoods, but you didn't have this problem because you didn't have that economic model where the treatment facilities are really, for lack of a better word, they're brokering people, and right now they are paying. The standard model is that the rent is being paid. That's illegal. And I've said that in public meetings, it's illegal. You can't induce somebody to go to treatment by giving them a benefit. It's what the law says. So, what you've had is you've had this economic connection to treatment facilities, and I think for the benefit of the patients, you're not discriminating against people with a disability. You're actually trying to help them. You know, we're not trying to ban recovery residences from our perspective. We're trying to regulate and improve. And by the way, many of these recovery residences will drop away. These flop houses can't get licensed. They can't get certified because they're flop houses. All right? So this will take care of, to a large degree, it will take care of much of the problem that you're facing in your neighborhood. So that's the second half. First half, federal participation. There has been a federal task force in place for 2 years. I can't talk about what the federal task force is doing, but we are separate and apart. There are partners, you know, the statewide, the AG's office, the Attorney General's office, the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's office. We are all partners in this. We are all rowing in the same direction. But what they're doing is not what we're doing. They're looking at different things, and they're not going to hold us back, and we are not going to hold them back. But we're separate. We share intelligence, but we're separate. Yes, ma'am, in the blue.
There's a claim of protection by ADA, and why don't these houses have to be ADA compliant in all aspects? Bathrooms, doorways, ramps, fire extinguishers, fire alarm systems.
I don't.
If it's a health and safety issue, and these people are under a classification that says vulnerable or disabled,
If we get the legislation through that we're trying to get through, that will happen in most cases. I can't answer for what the ADA requires or doesn't require. For that, you're going to have to talk to your city attorney.
if I have a business and I'm renting a new space, I have to make sure that bathroom there is ADA compliant. Because whether it has to be a certain height, it has to have whatever else, those limits.
The recovery residence is not like a business, but I can't speak to why it's gone haywire. Because when people are in recovery, they actually are disabled, and they are classified as disabled. It's different than asking a business to make sure that you have a ramp so that people in wheelchairs can get into your facility. If you go, my understanding is if as a municipality you go after a recovery resident to try to get them out, that then you open yourself up to a lawsuit. But I can't speak to that because my understanding may not be anywhere near reality.
I understand, but from a municipality standpoint or a county standpoint, we're really concerned about the health and safety needs of these residents, that I think they should all be ADA compliant.
Okay. Ma'am, you in the green.
I'm ignorant about how you were describing the coupling between rent and treatment. Can you explain that a little bit better?
Well, as I see it, and I got involved in this in April when we first were tapped to lead this task force. And boy, has it been an education. What has happened is, as I see it, is most of the industry, not all the industry, but most of the industry has gotten into a pattern, and call it what you will, but they've gotten into a pattern of giving rent subsidies or paying the rent of people who are in recovery. As I see the brokering statute, that's illegal, and I said it publicly at our meetings, and we'll see what happens down the road. That basically answers your question. Sir, you in the blue? Yeah, you.
You said that law doesn't actually provide a benefit for people seeking treatment, but what about when people get arrested for crimes other than substance-related crimes, and they use substance as an excuse to get out of jail when it comes time for probation?
I'm not really familiar with any known defense other than no. There's no diminished capacity defense. So if somebody's using drugs, they don't get away with it just because they say I'm a drug addict. Now, there is in Palm Beach County a drug court which is actually very effective, but it's not dropping the case. So I'm not even familiar with what you're talking about. That might be an urban legend. Yes, if you have a specific case, I can't. If it's active, I can't talk about it. But if it's closed,
It's closed.
okay. What do you got?
It actually involves a family member who was in domestic violence attack, and they got arrested for that. And then as part of the release, they didn't have an address to go home to. So a homeless person or someone who doesn't have an actual address, they can elect to say that they have a substance abuse problem, and then get directed to the substance abuse.
Sure.
And then just get a job.
And that's pre-trial. That's at first appearance when they come in. I don't have a residence. And then the court may, through services, may find a shelter or a treatment facility for that person. But that doesn't mean the crime goes away.
No, it's
Yeah, okay.
They use that as an excuse to go into the outside world.
Well, I don't want to get bogged down in bonds and how release works. There's a presumption that a person does get released because they're not guilty until they're proven by my office beyond a reasonable doubt to have done what they are accused of doing. We are very aggressive in trying to protect society by requiring, if somebody's a danger to society, we're going to ask for a bond or a high bond. The courts sometimes will look at a substance abuse problem and they won't release them outright, but will release them through a program. And then they still have to come back to court. They still have to face the music. That's not necessarily a bad thing. If they have a long record and they're child abusers or they're sexual abuse predators or they're murderers or they're serial burglars, that's different. But you're talking about a misdemeanor, which is a domestic violence case, and the judges are generally going to try to seek a way to let somebody out. We're kind of far afield of what we're here for, but without knowing more, that's probably what happened. But again, the case doesn't go away just because the judge will release somebody into a treatment. Ma'am.
Yes, the proposed legislation, when do you think it's going to be going through, and what kind of statewide support does it have?
Everyone in this room should support this legislation. That's number one.
Like North Florida,
One of the problems that I get it, and the question is, what's the legislation? When is it targeted to go to Tallahassee? And what are the chances of getting that legislation enacted? Because last year there was some pretty good legislation. We made it better, but some pretty good legislation that didn't pass because forces opposed the legislation. We're not naive. We have sponsors in the House and the Senate who really want to make a difference, and they're from South Florida, and they really want to make a difference. We're trying to get the legislature's attention that this is a statewide issue. It's not just Palm Beach County, and it's not just South Florida. Time-wise, I'm confident that we will have something to the staffs of the legislators, Hager and Clemens, by November. And it'll get into committee, and I'm going to be there in Tallahassee. I was joking with Dave. They're going to have to get me an apartment because that's where I'll be living in the spring, I guess. And they said, don't worry about it. We have rooms for the whole session. And, you know, a lot of moving parts here. And one of the things that we're doing with the legislation is to try to get everybody to agree. Because there are a lot of providers in the treatment industry that have seen it go down the tubes and have seen their business suffer because of these bad actors who are siphoning off and poaching these persons in recovery to the point where the people remain. They never get better. They just go into this cycle where they just relapse and they go back in and then they come out and they go into a bad home and then they relapse. And we've got to stop that cycle, and we've got to clean up the industry. And getting support is one of the jobs that Dave is trying to do, and he's doing a good job of it. Sir.
Mary Ann was first, but after Mary Ann.
Oh, thank you.
And you must be Mary Ann. You've got a name badge.
How are you going to control the issue in person relapses in silver girls once it has been treated? Because right now they're thrown out. Can you restate the
Okay,
question?
I will restate the question, and it's a good one. All these questions are good ones. What do we do about somebody who relapses while they're living in a recovery residence? And I use it interchangeably, but I try to call them recovery residents rather than sober homes. Sober homes are something different. They're Oxford model. You don't even know they're there because those people are already out of treatment and they're already heading in the right direction and they're monitoring themselves. But recovery residences are truly places where people are one click away from addiction. So the question was, what do you do when somebody relapses and they get thrown out on the street? And that's a huge issue. It's one of the things we're attacking with some of this legislation to try to get well, number one, I think it's a good idea to have the parents or guardians notified. Hey, you know, I mean, right now there's no way, we don't even know what the sober homes are, recovered residences are in the community, because unless it's voluntary, they're uncertified and they're not licensed. So that's number one. There's a Bill of Rights we're working on that will address this. A 48-hour, I mean, we need to have a better detox situation where a Marchman Act that somebody could at least get into detox for 72 hours so that they're not just thrown out on the street using drugs. It's never going to be a perfect world. We're dealing with addicts. It's unpredictable, and we can make it better. And clearly, if they're in a better environment, they're less likely to relapse. If you have some place that actually is certified and licensed, and all the ADA requirements are met,